Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Many of us have cravings, things that we yearn and reach out for at particular times of the day, or perhaps there are things going on in our lives that cause us to crave particular foods or perhaps drink. Trying to figure out how we can manage these things so that we can perhaps manage better health as well as our weight is something that we need to learn how to do. In fact, it's considered the missing link to weight loss, the secrets for overcoming self-sabotage, and today we're going to be talking about the 15 origins of food cravings and how they identify them, successful ways that we can curb things such as sugar, salt, and much, much more. On our program today is a professional chef, author, speaker, and certified health and nutritional coach. She educates people worldwide about how to make behavioral changes resulting in improved nutrition and better energy. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today, author of the book Cravings Boss, The Real Reason You Crave Food and a 5-Step Plan to Take Back Control. Our guest, Natalia Levy. Natalia, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for such a stellar introduction, Daniel.
Well, it's quite a commitment when you take on something as big as cravings. It's an industry that's billions of dollars that actually counts on people to follow through with those very things.
That's true. That's very true. When I studied everything that I needed to, in order to really probably a mission to write this book, the quality that I would be satisfied with, yes, it was extraordinary to understand what the marketing companies do, and the companies would even just design recipes and food products. I mean, I'm a trained chef, so for me, it was an interesting sort of concept right there.
I understand in your particular story that you grew up where the family stocked something like 20 packages of what are known as sweet corn puffs. And tell us what was going on there and why the feeling that the family had to have so much of that.
Well, I grew up in Moscow, Russia, during communist times in the 80s. So we didn't have a whole lot of choices. So the food was some available, but, some things like treats like that were sparse. And this was a treat. And treats were truly treats. It wasn't an everyday treat. It was something that was only available a few times a year. And, we would stock up.
It's interesting. There was someone I knew some years ago who was talking about, for instance, sugar, as I mentioned earlier in the program, and he was noticing how this parent was actually rewarding the child with candy, ice cream, things like that. And he says, if you keep this up, you're going to have your child here is going to grow up to be a heroin addict. I thought, well, don't you think that's a little bit extreme? Well, certainly enough, years later, that's exactly what happened. So it was really amazing how something like that gets entrenched or ingrained, into somebody where the craving becomes to a point where you become very focused and loyal to that craving. Now, in your time of, being able to go out there and talk to people about this, what have you noticed people sharing with you when it comes to things such as cravings and how it's pretty much, in some cases, overtaken a person's life?
Well, this is really interesting because I do speak with a lot of parents about talking to their children the right way. And it's kind of hypocritical when people go to the dental office and then the dentist have candy, at the end of the visit, which is completely, give the kid something else, like a toothbrush stick or something. So when I speak with people, it's interesting for me to understand how far back the cravings go. So when I studied with the Institute for Functional Medicine, they have this process that they train us to go through, which is a big discovery process when we work with people on really understanding, and we go back in time. We go back and we sort of create a timeline of where the first time they've experienced something. Did something trigger them? What was the family situation like growing up? Because like you said, everything that we're experiencing now, the foundation may have been laid a long time ago, since the childhood. So my job is to help people break those patterns and find a happier way to live.
I remember a time when I was with a girlfriend. We were at her parents' house enjoying Thanksgiving. And I found it interesting to watch her dad, because he seemed that he had to feel this need to eat every single thing that was on that Thanksgiving table, otherwise things didn't feel complete. There's one of those holidays where certainly people find themselves craving to binge.
Oh, that's so true. That's so true. I was just writing a a blog post on helping people to stay away from Halloween candy and then going into Thanksgiving. And yes, you're right. For a lot of people, we get ingrained to, well, there's starving kids in Africa, and you have to eat everything on your plate, and if you eat everything on the plate, you can have dessert. So instead of teaching, and again, it goes back to the childhood, it's teaching the kids to eat as much as you need, but also putting the proper nutrient-dense meal in front of them. So one of the ways that I recommend that people deal with that is so simple, is to just incorporate as many vegetables in the meal as possible, and just cutting back on sugar and fat, bad fat, saturated fat.
Now, what was it that inspired you to write this book?
Oh my gosh! So when I was studying with when I was studying to become the certified health coach and a nutritionist, I studied with so many doctors and different experts and just hundreds of different dietary theories. Like from the paleo diet to grapefruit diet to your next neighbor's diet. I think that we all have tried some of those. And it's interesting, what I've come across is that a lot of people, they want that quick fix. They want something, they want to lose 3 pounds in the weekend and then look good for the weekend, but then there is no longevity. So I started investigating, why do diets don't work? Because the statistics show that between 75 and 95% of all diets fail. And even when I was watching a program or reading in the New York Times Magazine about the contestants on The Biggest Loser show, is that how many of them, they lose the weight, but then the cravings come back and they gain the weight back. So being that this curious person that I am and trying to connect the dots, I started to realize that no matter what diet or exercise program people go on, the cravings are still there. So now for me, I crave green juice. I crave things that are good for me. But I needed to create a very simple system for the people to turn to when they are going through that withdrawal process, if they're trying something like an elimination diet. So I myself have done a 21-day elimination diet. It was hardcore. My doctor recommended it, and that was brutal. And that was sort of what really pushed me towards going through the process, as I was going through the process myself, or with major withdrawals, to come up with something simple that I can use, and then so that it can help a lot of people.
Now, in talking about cravings, as you do in your book, what do you think is the real reason that people have them? I know you touched on a little bit, but I mean, there are times people actually, I guess, rationalize why they feel they need to have something, whether it's a chocolate shake or salty French fries, things like that.
Right. So in the book, I talk about 15 different causes of cravings. And it could be one of them that comes into play. It could be a combination. Sometimes you could be simply stressed or dehydrated, or you could have a nutrient deficiency. So my focus with this book is to have people have the readers go through the entire process and use this book as a reference so that they can always look up and say, okay, you know what, today I know that I'm stressed. And then something that triggered my stress, and then something that triggered the craving. So in essence, the book teaches people how to pinpoint exactly what's going on in their life, and then that moment experiencing that craving, and then it gives them the tools on how to deal with it.
Now, did you have cravings yourself that you were trying to overcome?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, who doesn't? Being that I grew up from in Russia, in a different country, now I live in the United States, I noticed that now, for me, the biggest thing that I crave is the food that I had as a child. So I still have those corn pops. Would you believe it that I actually have a bag on my desk, and I've been looking at it for 2 weeks, and I haven't touched it. So it's things like that. When I was pregnant, I craved ice cream and Zeppeli. Actually, we lived in New York City, and every weekend we would go to the street fair, and they would have those Zeppelis. And I kept telling my husband, "Oh my gosh, this is the last street fair that we're going to see," so we had to go get. So I think for me, it's always been sweet. But then now that knowing how to manage, it's still something that I enjoy every once in a while, but what I really don't right now. It's not something that I crave as much. How about you? What do you crave?
Well, I found myself, it was interesting, I was talking to a friend about this when I knew we were going to do this as a segment, and I said, well, there was a time that that I was sort of diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. And for people who may not have an understanding with that, sometimes that in our minds we will have voices that get to a point that seems overwhelming where we have to act. And it seems to people on the outside world looking at this that we're acting on our impulses, which to a degree is true. So, for instance, if I was going to the store because I needed milk in the house, I might find myself coming back without the milk, but a lot of other things that aren't even related to the store that I was going to go to in the first place. Could be CDs, whatever the case is. And what I would describe is that you would have this thought come in to a point that it was so loud that the only way that you could soothe it was by going and getting that thing that was actually causing you to have this sort of, I guess, anxiety, if you will, in the first place. And it got to a point where I started really paying attention to that and slowing it down, sort of even asking questions, do I really need to have this right now? Do I need to act on this? And really kind of working with that. And I found that I don't have cravings, to that degree, I guess, like I might have used to. And it's pretty interesting because I know that's what your book really talks about, that it isn't so much, let's say, the food item that you crave, but usually there's an emotional attachment to it, isn't there?
Well, yes, there's definitely an emotional attachment. It's a huge part of it. And then there's also the actual taste component. So I teach, I actually created a course over the summer on the same subject. So it's more practical application. And we really dive in deeper into what is the texture of the food. Because, I mean, if you think about when you're craving French fries, you're not craving a potato, right? So when you're craving French fries, you're craving them because they're salty and crispy or fatty or something. So there's a lot more flavor sensations going on than just a potato. So that's something that's also very important to keep in mind. And I've actually put together a guide of food swaps for my students. And, they love it to be able to identify, so when you think of French fries or potato chips, or I had some people say that they crave sushi, so then we'll look into what is their flavor profile, and then you come up with a healthy substitute for that. So that's a very important thing to also consider besides the big emotional factor.
Did you find that was the case for you? Was it an emotional factor, or do you find that to be also the case with other people when they come and approach you about how they can solve this problem?
It's very complex. I think it's a combination. It's never just one thing, because I know that some people, like, for example, I will drink olive oil, but I don't like olives. So it's not necessarily, and with that I know olive oil is good for me, and then olives, it's just, I don't know if it's a texture thing. I've been trying to figure it out. I'm having my friends help me figure this out. So I think that that we have to look at each case individually. And here's why. I think that the future of medicine is going to be truly personalized medicine, because there is no cookie-cutter answer for every single person. We are all different. We all come from completely different backgrounds. We are all different ages, different medical histories. And that's why it's so important for each person to sort of be involved and take responsibility for their own health and be the boss of their health.
That's really interesting, to be able to empower people to take on this. Do they find it to be challenging at first?
At first, there is a little bit of resistance that I usually find, but I make it such a fun process that the people that I have worked with, they each take away something for themselves. So, for example, I had this one student, and she came to the course, and she's gone through the health coaching program, and she still had difficulty losing weight. And then after going through this, she went to the doctor, and the doctor told her, well, you lost 4 pounds, so do whatever you keep doing, keep doing. And then another thing that I encourage people to do is to actually do work with a doctor, because there's a combination between the modern medicine and the alternative approach, which is something that I like to do, and I talk about all these different alternative therapies that we incorporate in dealing with this. And I think that when you connect, when we build that bridge between modern and alternative, and when we look at each individual case, that's when really we get to success, and then all the walls of resistance, they fall down, and we laugh and we have fun. And that's one of the things about this book is that it's so funny.
Well, I think sometimes it should be, just because when a person takes something like this too seriously and they find out they're not successful, then it makes things even worse, doesn't it?
Oh my gosh, yes. And what's interesting, when I've gone through so many medical trainings, I have sat through so many presentations that were boring. So one of the things that I took upon myself is I find that humor is such a good way to get through to people. So, I've come up with different little cartoons to put in the videos that I do, and always tell people that, look, you're not alone. This is not all doom and gloom. This is not a strict thing that you need to follow. There's something that everyone can find for themselves and apply for themselves. One student, she absolutely loved using your imagination for dealing with cravings. Like, that was her favorite thing. And you can't go wrong with that.
Now, when it comes to cravings, one of the things that people will notice, too, that sometimes seasons have an important role in this. For instance, we might find that we'll reach out to things to make us feel a little more comfortable, especially in the wintertime. Is it true that seasons might have an impact on what we crave?
Yes, absolutely. So, usually in the wintertime, we tend to go towards heartier recipes, meal choices. Because also we tend to wear more clothes, so we're not as concerned about having the bikini-ready body, unless you live in Florida like me. So absolutely, and then in the summertime, while people try to, so the biggest time that people lose weight is between probably March and June. So that's springtime, so that they get their bikini body ready, and then over the summer they feel good, but then it starts with the ice creams and with the fruit juices and with all of that stuff available, and then going into the fall, you're going back off track for some reason, not some people, and then they fall right back into that pattern. So we go through the season of yo-yo dieting, in essence.
Nothing like a yo-yo diet, huh?
Oh, Lord. Don't even get me started with that.
Now, if you could first, Natalia, talk about the 5 steps that you outlined in your book, just real briefly to give folks an idea of what they can expect.
Oh, yes. I love the 5 steps. So the first step is actually, and it's funny because I call these the Cravings operating agreement because you have to be Cravings boss and you have to have systems in the business, and I feel that our health should be our business. So step number 1 is to pause and have a 2-minute board meeting with ourselves. So when you take the time to take a pause and not react right away, you eliminate the possibility of making a mistake and making a rash decision. Then step number 2 is to examine the facts. And that's the causes of the cravings that I had mentioned before. I talk about 15 different causes. And to really, once you go through the book and understand what each one is, it'll be so easy to pinpoint exactly what's going on. Step number 3 is to pinpoint the trigger. So a note on triggers is sometimes we could be craving a cupcake, and you can go through a whole day thinking about this cupcake. And then something happens where you could be passing by a cupcake store, and that becomes a trigger which brought up this daily desire of you craving the cupcake to actually, it's right there. So it's actually an environmental trigger, right? Because you find yourself in an environment where this cupcake is available. So that's what trigger does. So the trigger is a specific situation in time that might compel you to making a good or bad decision. So then step number 4 is to promote your imagination. And I love this one. I usually play a little game with people. Would you like to play a game with me?
Absolutely.
All right. So do you have a Hollywood crush by chance? I don't want to get you in trouble, so feel free.
You know, I can't think of one right now, but certainly when I was younger, I've had 1 or 2 of them here and there.
All right. So you said that you don't really crave, but what would be that one food that you feel like would sabotage you?
Let me see here. That's an interesting one to really ask about. Let's, sometimes I like peanuts, in the shell, salted peanuts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. So you're staring at a full bucket of peanuts, and when you are thinking of peanuts and when you eat them, do you eat just a few nuts and that satisfies you, or do you go through kind of the whole jar?
No, I'll usually pretty much go all the way.
All right.
That compulsion of popping the shell and there's the peanut on the inside. You pop that in, you keep going, so it's sort of like a double thing going on.
All right. So this is really, really interesting. So now imagine that you're about to dive into those peanuts. Now you know already consciously that you will get to the bottom of this, and there's nothing stopping you. But what if you were to use your imagination right now, and what if you were to pretend that as you're about to take that first peanut and get to the point of no return, you get a phone call from either somebody, okay, well, tell me who is your person of the year that you would want to, like, who is your dream person to have lunch with?
Dream person to have lunch with. Geez, these are things I just don't think about too much, I guess. Well, let's say Anthony Robbins might be one.
All right, so Tony Robbins, he's awesome. I just watched his movie on Netflix. I'm not too good. It was quite interesting. So imagine, so you're staring at that peanut, and Tony Robbins calls you up, and he says, "Hey, man, I'm like 30 minutes away from your house, and I'm going to pick you up. Get your stuff together and get ready for lunch with me." Would you go for that peanut?
Probably not.
Okay, so you see, so a good thought, this is a beautiful part about using your imagination, is you can imagine not even somebody who you have a crush on. and they call you up and invite you to the Oscars. But you can also picture of having a meeting with somebody as powerful as Tony Robbins, and use that as the way to stop cravings dead in its tracks. So, which brings us to step number 5, which is fire your cravings.
So
those are the 5 steps. Yes. So step number 5 is fire your cravings, which is you take the appropriate action. So if the cravings are bad, you let them go. You fire them. You tell them, go find another job.
I kind of like that, firing your cravings. I think a lot of people, especially those who crave cigarettes, for instance, is one that certainly they can find a way to try to do in this. Do you have people being successful with something like that?
I have only worked with people with food cravings. We haven't touched, because I feel that cigarette and alcohol addictions, they're a little bit more on the medical side, where with this, which I'm not qualified to deal with
Understood.
addictions. I'm being honest and upfront here.
Understood, absolutely. And you're right, they are a little bit different, food cravings versus something like that. Now, first of all, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to be on our program today. I mean, there sure is a lot to cover in this book, and I encourage people to go out if they're trying to beat a food craving, and it's The Cravings Boss, The Real Reason You Crave Food, and the 5-Step Plan to Take Back Control. And our guest joining us here on the program, Natalia Levy. Now, where is a website people can find out more? What can they expect?
Thank you, Daniel, first of all, for taking the time and being open and honest with me today. I know I put you on the spot there.
Oh, that's okay. If you're not, it's funny that people, when they may not be honest about something like this, I think there's probably an element of shame that might be involved. Like, how could I have been so weak that I put myself in this situation in the first place? But all of us kind of have that, don't we?
We do, and that's why I encourage people to not get stuck in the future and take action.
Exactly.
So you can take action now. You can go to cravingsboss.com to find out more about me.
Very good. Cravings.com, huh?
Cravingsboss.
Cravingsboss.com. Very good. Well, Natalia, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today to share this with our listeners and encourage them to get out there if they want to do something about this. This is the way to go. And as you said, be patient with yourself. Have a sense of humor about the whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't take yourself too seriously. And get an accountability buddy. It's always more fun to do this with friends.
I'll let you be my accountability buddy.
Anytime, Daniel.
Natalia, thank you so much for joining us here on the program today.
Thank you.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. You can discover more by visiting us at beyond50radio.com, the number 50. You can also follow us on Facebook as well as Twitter at Beyond 50 Radio. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.